The House of Deception. Elena always believed in love, true love, the kind that her parents had, where every smile, every touch, was a promise of forever. So when she met Victor, a man who seemed to embody every quality she admired, she thought she had found her soulmate. They fell in love quickly, passionately, and within a year they were married. But as the years went by, Elena would learn that love can sometimes blind you to the truth, and that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. Chapter 1. The Warning Signs. It was a warm summer evening when the first sign of trouble appeared. Elena was sitting in the garden of her parents' house, the house that had become hers after their passing. The roses her mother had planted were in full bloom, filling the air with a sweet fragrance that reminded her of simpler times. She could still hear her mother's voice, teaching her how to care for the delicate flowers, and her father's laughter as he chased her around the yard when she was a child. Victor walked out onto the patio, his face stern. He had been on edge for weeks, distracted and irritable. Elena had chalked it up to stress from work, but tonight something felt different. "Elena, we need to talk," he said, his voice unusually cold. Elena looked up, sensing the gravity of his tone. "What's wrong, Victor?" Victor sat down across from her, his eyes locked on hers. "This house, it's a waste of potential. We're sitting on a gold mine, and you're treating it like some sentimental relic." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "Victor, this is my parents' house. It's not just a piece of property to me. It's a financial burden," Victor interrupted. "We could sell it, invest the money, and build a future for ourselves. Instead, you're clinging to the past." Elena felt a pang of anxiety. This wasn't the first time Victor had mentioned selling the house, but he had never been this forceful. "I'm not selling it, Victor. This house means too much to me. It's all I have left of them." Victor's eyes darkened. "Then transfer it to me." Elena stared at him, bewildered. "What are you talking about?" "If you won't sell it, then transfer the ownership to me. I'll handle everything. You won't have to worry about it." Elena's blood ran cold. "Why would I do that?" Victor leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "Because if you don't, I'm leaving you. I'll file for divorce tomorrow." Chapter 2. The Dilemma. Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her hands trembled as she clutched the armrests of her chair. "Victor, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," Victor replied, his gaze unyielding. "This is your chance to prove that you care about our future. If you love me, you'll do this." Elena felt like the ground was slipping out from under her. She had always thought of their marriage as a partnership, built on mutual respect and love. But this was something else entirely. She was being asked to choose between her husband and her parents' legacy. "Victor, please, let's talk about this. There has to be another way," Elena pleaded, her voice shaking. "There's nothing to talk about," Victor said, standing up. "You have until tomorrow to make your decision. If I don't have those papers by then, we're done." With that, he turned and walked back into the house, leaving Elena alone in the garden, her mind racing. How had things gotten so bad? Was their marriage really worth sacrificing everything she held dear? That night, Elena tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Victor was in the guest room, and the silence between them was deafening. She kept replaying his words in her head, trying to make sense of them. How could he be so cold, so calculating? The man she had married would never have treated her this way. But then again, maybe she had been blind to who Victor really was. Maybe she had ignored the warning signs, the little red flags that had popped up over the years, the way he dismissed her concerns, the way he belittled her love for the house, the way he always seemed more interested in money than anything else. By morning, Elena knew she had to make a decision, but no matter what she chose, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 3. The Confession. The next morning, Elena felt like she was walking in a daze. She went through the motions of her daily routine, but her mind was elsewhere. Victor was already dressed and ready for work when she came downstairs. He didn't speak to her, didn't even look at her, as he sipped his coffee. Elena stood by the kitchen counter, her heart pounding in her chest. "Victor, can we talk?" He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "What is there to talk about? I don't understand why you're doing this. Why now?" Elena's voice trembled as she spoke. Victor set his coffee cup down and looked at her with a mixture of impatience and disdain. "Because I'm tired of living in the past, Elena. We need to move forward, and that house is holding us back. If you can't see that, then maybe you're not the woman I thought you were." His words cut through Elena like a knife. "So, you're saying you don't love me anymore?" Victor sighed, as if the question was a burden. "I'm saying that I need a partner who's willing to make tough decisions for the future. If you're not that person, then maybe we should go our separate ways." Elena felt her eyes fill with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She needed to be strong, to show Victor that she wasn't going to be bullied into making a decision that went against everything she believed in. But before she could respond, Victor's phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and frowned. "I have to go. We'll talk about this tonight." Without another word, he grabbed his briefcase and left the house, leaving Elena standing alone in the kitchen, her emotions in turmoil. She couldn't believe that her marriage had come to this. How had they gone from being so in love to this cold, distant relationship? Elena spent the day trying to distract herself, but nothing could take her mind off the decision she had to make. She walked through the rooms of the house, each one filled with memories of her parents. Their laughter, their love, their wisdom. It was all still here, in these walls. And then she found herself in her father's study. It was exactly as he had left it, with his books and papers neatly arranged on the desk. Elena sat down in his old leather chair, running her fingers over the worn surface. She remembered how he used to sit here, reading to her from his favorite books, teaching her about the world. As she sat there, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. This house wasn't just a building. It was a living, breathing part of her family's history. She couldn't give it up. Not for Victor, not for anyone. But she also knew that if she didn't sign those papers, Victor would leave her. And as much as she hated to admit it, the thought of losing him was terrifying. Elena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had to be strong. She had to do what was right, even if it meant losing everything. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. When Victor returned home that evening, Elena was waiting for him in the living room. She had the papers on the coffee table, but she hadn't signed them. Her decision was made, but she needed to tell him face to face. Victor walked in, his expression still cold and distant. "Have you made your decision?" Elena nodded. "I have. I'm not signing the papers, Victor. I can't do it." For a moment, Victor said nothing. Then, slowly, he walked over to the coffee table and picked up the documents. "You're really going to throw away our marriage for this?" "I'm not throwing anything away," Elena said, her voice steady. "You are. You're the one who's choosing money over love, over our future." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Elena. You're going to regret this." "Maybe," Elena replied, standing her ground. "But I can't betray my parents like this. I can't give up the house." Victor stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, without a word, he tore the papers in half and threw them on the floor. "Fine," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Have it your way, but don't expect me to stick around." With that, he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Elena flinched at the sound, but she didn't cry. She felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. But as the days turned into weeks, Elena realized that living with that choice was going to be harder than she had imagined. Victor didn't come back, and he didn't call. She was left alone in the house, haunted by memories of her parents and the life she had once dreamed of building with Victor. She spent hours in the garden, tending to the roses her mother had loved so much. The work was soothing, a way to keep her mind off the emptiness she felt inside. But no matter how much time she spent outside, the house itself felt like a prison, filled with ghosts of the past. One day, while pruning the roses, Elena noticed something strange. A man in a suit was standing at the edge of the property, watching her. When she looked up, he quickly turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner. Elena's heart raced. Who was that man? And why was he watching her? Chapter 5. The Discovery. Over the next few days, Elena noticed the man several more times. He was always at a distance, always watching. She started to feel uneasy, as if something was terribly wrong. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing, but her instincts told her otherwise. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She called her friend Lisa, who worked as a private investigator, and asked her to look into it. A few days later, Lisa called back. "Elena, I found something. I'm not sure how to tell you this, but I think Victor's involved." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "Remember how you told me about the ultimatum he gave you? Well, it turns out Victor's been planning this for a while. The man watching your house is a real estate agent. Victor's been in talks with a developer who wants to buy your parents' house and turn it into luxury condos." Elena felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. "But I didn't sign the papers. How could he?" "It's not about the papers, Elena. Victor's trying to pressure you into selling. That's why he's been distant. Why he gave you that ultimatum. He knew you wouldn't sign, so he's trying to scare you into it." Elena's hands trembled as she held the phone. "What should I do?" "Don't sell, Elena. Don't let him win. You need to fight this, and if you want, I can help you gather evidence. We'll make sure Victor pays for what he's done." Elena felt a surge of anger and determination. Victor had betrayed her, tried to manipulate her into giving up the one thing she couldn't live without. But she wasn't going to let him get away with it. She was going to fight back. Chapter 6. The Plan. With Lisa's help, Elena started gathering evidence of Victor's deceit. They tracked down the developer, uncovered the shady deals Victor had been making behind her back, and even found proof of his affair with Lydia. Elena was devastated by the betrayal, but she was also determined to make sure Victor didn't win. She filed for divorce, using the evidence she had gathered to ensure that Victor wouldn't get a single penny from the sale of the house. But the battle was far from over. Victor was furious when he found out what Elena had done. He tried to intimidate her, threatened to drag her through a lengthy and painful divorce process. But Elena stood her ground. She was done being a victim. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, Elena realized just how much she had been blind to during her marriage. Victor had always been controlling, always more interested in money and power than in love or family. She had ignored the warning signs because she wanted to believe in the man she thought she married. But now, she could see him for who he really was, a manipulator, a liar, and a cheat. And she was determined to take back control of her life. Chapter 7. The Showdown. The day of the final divorce hearing arrived, and Elena felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. She knew that this was her chance to finally break free from Victor's control, to reclaim her life and her dignity. As she sat in the courtroom, waiting for the judge to make his decision, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This was the man she had once loved, the man she had dreamed of building a future with. But now, all she felt was anger and betrayal. Victor sat across from her, his face a mask of arrogance. He still believed he could win, that he could somehow convince the judge to side with him. But Elena knew better. She had the evidence, the truth on her side. When the judge finally delivered his verdict, Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. The divorce was granted, and Victor was denied any claim to the house. She had won, but more importantly, she had regained her freedom. Victor stormed out of the courtroom, his face red with anger. But Elena didn't care. She was done with him, done with the lies and manipulation. She was ready to start over, to rebuild her life on her own terms. Epilogue. The new beginning months passed, and Elena found herself slowly healing from the trauma of her marriage. She had moved out of the house temporarily, renting a small apartment in the city while she figured out what to do next. But she knew she would eventually return to the house, to the place where she had grown up, where her parents' memories still lingered. In the meantime, Elena threw herself into her work. She had always been passionate about helping others, and now she had the chance to start her own nonprofit organization, dedicated to supporting women who had been through similar situations. She wanted to make sure that no one else had to go through what she had. As her organization grew, Elena began to find a new sense of purpose and fulfillment. She was helping others, making a difference in the world, and in doing so, she was also healing herself. One day, while visiting the house to check on some repairs, Elena stood in the garden, looking at the roses her mother had planted. They were blooming beautifully, a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. As she looked around, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had been through so much, but she had come out stronger on the other side. The house, once a place of pain and memories, had become a symbol of her strength, a reminder of the love and values her parents had instilled in her. Elena knew that she still had a long way to go, but she was ready for whatever the future held. She had faced her demons, fought back against the darkness, and now she was free to create the life she had always dreamed of. And as for Victor, she no longer cared what happened to him. She had finally closed that chapter of her life, and she was ready to start a new one filled with hope, love, and the knowledge that she had the strength to overcome anything.